Today on How It's Made. Boomerangs, designed for a good rate of return. Barbecues, all the juicy details about how they make them. Pinball machines, we go to the factory to check out the game plan. And strobe lights, a very flashy product indeed. But first, boomerangs have come a long way over the years and are now finely crafted gizmos. Originally, people threw sticks to hunt, and that's probably how they discovered that certain bent sticks would circle back. You could say that the boomerang is a bit of a throwback to primitive times. Boomerangs come in many shapes and sizes. Production begins with a solid piece of wood. Here, the growth rings are highlighted to demonstrate that the later growth is narrower. This means it's denser, so it will be easier to work with. The woodworker takes 16 strips of that dense wood and places them in a steam box for 20 minutes. The steam makes the strips much more flexible. They're so elastic, they can be bent by hand. Watch how he arcs all 16 layers at once, with very little effort. Now he has the basic form of a boomerang. To improve the contour, he clamps the strips in a boomerang-shaped mould. They remain clamped for a day or two, long enough to dry and harden into the bent form. He spreads glue onto each bent strip, then clamps them together in the mould again. This time the mould has been coated with wax to prevent the glued strips from sticking to it. It's left to set overnight. Then the laminated boomerang shape is removed. It's solid, but far too chunky to fly. The woodworker slices it into pieces 10 millimeters thick. The piece of laminated wood yields about 6 thinner pieces. Each one is light enough to be a boomerang. But it needs more form, and he has to get rid of those rough edges. So he outlines a more refined design and cuts it out. But there's an easier way to make a boomerang, with sturdy aircraft plywood. With plywood, there's no need to laminate and then physically bend the wood. He simply cuts out the pattern, then sculpts the tops of the wings with a drum sander. He's made the tops of the 2 wings curve upwards, but in opposite directions. It's this contouring that will make the boomerang fly in a circle. On some models, embedded lead weights help to balance it. The laminated boomerang gets the same contouring, but a file is used instead of a drum sander. Laminated wood responds better to this technique, but it's much more labor-intensive and it takes skill. One mistake in the shape and size, and it will throw off the aerodynamics of the boomerang. But our woodworker has the job down to a fine art. To tune the boomerang, he softens it over a steaming kettle while twisting the wings into an upward flip, similar to an aeroplane wing. This blower dries the wood to ensure it stays flipped. He then sets the boomerang on a flat surface to check the curve. He sprays sealant onto the boomerang and finally, he gives it several coats of lacquer for a high gloss finish. And now these boomerangs are ready to run rings around the competition. The origins of the barbecue are clouded in a bit of a smoky haze, but it's believed the Caribbeans were the first barbecuers. Of course, back then they didn't have charcoal grills. They roasted their meat over a smoky pit. Today there's nothing like a barbie in the garden, and the taste of incinerated burgers. Production of a basic grill begins with large steel discs. A machine with rollers coats each one with a soapy lubricant. Then they're fed to a press that stretches the disc into a bowl. Stretching steel is a bit tricky. It could tear if they don't lubricate it well enough. So each disc gets a generous application before it goes under the press. The press swiftly transforms the flat piece of steel into a round bowl. This is a back view of the press. Using mechanical might, the ram delivers 500 tons of pressure. A similar type of press is used to make the lids for the barbecues. An operator inspects each part for splits and cracks. Then it's over to a press that trims the rim. The scrap pieces are tossed into a bin for recycling. Next, the barbecue bowl is spun while an automated roller flanges the rim. After that, the bowl is perforated to make holes for ventilation. Now they bring out the welding guns. The guns fuse metal couplings to the bowls to serve as attachments for the barbecue's legs. Here, handles are loaded into a fixture. A turntable swings into action and delivers the bowl to welders that fasten the handles to each side. At another station, they're working on the barbecue lids. A handle is welded onto each one. This one will allow the chef to lower the lid to control the cooking temperature, and then lift it again when it's time to flip those burgers. The barbecue parts now travel on an overhead rail to the wash station. Here, nozzles hose them down with soapy water and then rinse them. Once they're dry, they head over to the finishing department, where they are dusted with a glass powder. Then it's into a furnace that's 848 degrees Celsius. The furnace bakes the glass dust into an enamel finish that will protect the parts from rust and stains so they'll last for years. Next, they go under lights which expose any defects in what should be a mirror-like finish. The technician examines each part, inside out. A punch machine now makes dampers from aluminium. It simultaneously cuts the shapes and embosses the company's trademark onto them. A damper is a handy attachment that enables the chef to control the flow of air to the grill. Nylon grips are put on the handles. And the damper is installed over the lid's ventilation holes. It's up to the consumer to do the final assembly. Something that should take just a few minutes before all your mates arrive. Coming up on How It's Made, we ask, why are these people so busy? And why is this woman breathing fire? Before video games, the pinball machine reigned supreme. The action is real and not on a screen. You pull a plunger and get the ball rolling. You hit flippers and navigate bumpers, all to the clamour of clanging bells and flashing lights. No wonder it's not yet game over for pinball. The game of pinball is unprogrammed and unpredictable. Reams of wire make up the pinball machine's electronics. There's more than 3/4 of a kilometre in one model. Different types of colour-coded wire are used. They're wound around pins and attached to the connectors on the circuit board. There's a detailed set of instructions and an engineering drawing to keep things from getting in a tangle. The wires are removed in loosely tied bunches. This allows them to move freely as the tips are soldered together. Not all wires are soldered. Others get attachments called lugs. These are crimped onto the ends of the wires with a hydraulic machine. These lugs will be used to connect wires to attachments on the playfield. The cable is hooked up to a testing board and every circuit is checked. The playfield, adorned with colourful art, is placed onto a bed of nails with foam strips. The nail bed rises and presses against the header. The nails prick the back of the board, but the foam strips stop them from going through. These nail holes will serve as markers for installing pinball targets and tactical features on the playfield. Next, a few holes are drilled, and the playfield is covered with a metal template to drill more holes. These will be used to mount some of the pinball gadgetry onto the playfield. Anchors are hammered in to attach the metal railings that keep the silver balls from rolling off the playfield. There's a lamp post, followed by some plastic bumpers. 115 flashing lights are installed. Now it's time to permanently attach all that wiring. Some are soldered directly onto the board, others are fused to switches. A speaker is bolted into the cabinet for some major sound effects. The spring-powered plunger goes in next. Without it, you couldn't take your opening shot. A toy villain is attached. And a ramp in the shape of a sword is added, along with a few other toy characters. The ball is run into every target and mechanism to test the switches. There can be up to 70 switches in a game. Every button is pressed as a computerized system diagnoses any malfunctions. nothing is overlooked. If everything works, the playfield is then slid into the cabinet. It gets a shatterproof window because it could take some abuse from enthusiastic gamers. A metal bar is used to lock it all down. Finally, the header is mounted and this pinball machine is wired and ready for action. Mention strobe lights and a 70s disco comes to mind. But you also find them on aircraft wings, on police cars, and on towers and tall buildings to warn low-flying aircraft. They even play a role in photography and on factory production lines. Most enlightening. A strobe lamp emits repeated flashes of high-intensity light. At this factory, production begins with glass blowers. Using a ribbon burner, glass tubes are heated to 1600 degrees Celsius. This softens the glass for bending into a specific shape. At the same time, air is blown through a rubber hose attached to one end of the tube. A cork in the other end traps the air inside. This builds counter pressure to prevent the tube walls from collapsing inward as the glass softens. The size and shape of the glass tube varies by model, but its job is always the same: to house electrodes, wires, and xenon gas. The electrodes conduct the current, which charges the gas with electricity, making it illuminate. This factory makes several models, some in large quantities for the mass market, others in small quantities, custom designed for specific clients. With mass-produced models, after glass blowing, automated machines take over. Custom orders are handmade from start to finish. Even the electrodes are made manually. A precise amount of metal powder is weighed out and poured into the cavity of a press similar to those used by pharmaceutical factories to make pills. This powder is a blend of several different materials, but the company won't divulge what they are. The press applies 4 tons of pressure, compressing the powder into a pellet. The factory inspects every pellet to ensure it meets quality standards. The pellets then undergo a process called sintering. They bake for 9 minutes in a hydrogen-fueled oven. Hydrogen because it burns at high temperatures. The 1700 degrees Celsius heat fuses the powder particles into a solid unit that won't crumble apart. Next, a wire is welded to each electrode. 2 electrodes are inserted, one for the positive current, one for the negative, into each glass tube. Then the end of that tube is melted closed. Then a wire called a trigger lead is attached. It works like a car's ignition, prompting a transformer to send a high-voltage electric pulse to the electrodes, illuminating the gas. This automated machine assembles the factory's mass-produced models. Before it's set in motion, the components are loaded: a pair of electrodes made by an automated pill press, and the glass tube on top. Now the machine takes over. It vacuums out the air in the tube, then injects xenon gas, then melts the glass tube closed under the electrodes, then cuts off the excess glass. The tube's interior must be completely free of contaminants for the gas to illuminate, so just before the vacuum fill and seal operation, a hot coil encircles each tube to burn away any impurities. On custom-made models, all these steps are carried out manually. The strobe lamp is finished and ready for installation. This model is for those warning lights you see on tow trucks and road construction vehicles. It goes into a glass reflector lined with metallic film. A transformer regulates the voltage. Its 3 wires connect to the positive, negative, and trigger leads, protruding from the lamp. A glass lens cover seals and protects the lamp within the reflector. And there you have it. Well, that went by in a flash. So, whether you're after a good return on your investment or looking to purchase something to entertain in the summer months, or perhaps you're just a big kid after a big boy's toy, now you know how it's made.